Ferrari just uncovered a loophole so powerful, the FIA had to change the rules before the next race. Because after being dominated in Australia and China, Ferrari found something no one else fully understood. Not on track. Inside the regulations. A hidden flaw that allowed Mercedes to extract more performance, exactly when it matters most. Even the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile admitted that engines could exceed the intended limits under real conditions. And now, just days before the Japanese Grand Prix, that loophole is being shut down. Which means one thing. Mercedes is about to be exposed, for the first time this season. So the real question is not if Ferrari found something. The real question is, did they just take away the advantage that made Mercedes unbeatable? Subscribe now, because what happens in Japan could change everything. At first, Ferrari did not react like a team that was simply slower. They reacted like a team that knew something did not make sense. Because after Australia, the gap was already too big. Nearly a full second in qualifying. Not in one corner. Not in one sector. Everywhere. And when that happens in a brand new regulation era, it raises a very specific question. How is one team understanding everything so quickly? Then came China. A completely different track. Different layout. Different demands. And yet, the same story. Mercedes still in control. Still pulling away at the exact same moments. And that is when Ferrari stopped looking at results and started looking at patterns. Because the data was not normal. Mercedes was not the fastest at the speed traps. Not the highest top speed. Not the most obvious power. And yet, they were always gaining time where it mattered most. At the end of straights. At the exact moment where energy should start dropping. And that is what triggered everything. Because in 2026, performance is no longer just about power. It is about energy. How you deploy it. How you recover it. How long you can sustain it. And Ferrari realized something critical. Mercedes was not just using energy better. They were accessing something others were not. Something hidden. Something that did not show up in a simple data comparison. And that is when Ferrari made a decision that changed everything. They stopped chasing the car. And started investigating the system behind it. Not the setup. Not the aerodynamics. The rules. Because when performance cannot be explained on track, the answer is usually hidden somewhere much deeper. And that is exactly where Ferrari found it. Because what Ferrari found was not visible in lap time. It was hidden in how the rules were being applied. A small detail, with massive consequences. The compression ratio. 16:1. A strict limit. Or at least, that is what everyone believed. But Ferrari noticed something most teams ignored. That limit was only being verified under specific conditions. Cold conditions. Static testing. Not when the engine is actually running on track. And that changes everything. Because a Formula 1 engine behaves completely differently when it is hot. Extreme temperatures. Extreme pressure. Constant variation in combustion. Which means one critical thing. An engine can pass every official test and still operate differently in real race conditions. And that is exactly where Ferrari focused. Because if the rule only controls one state of the engine, then the other state becomes a gray area. And inside that gray area, performance exists. Real performance. Hidden performance. And this is where the situation becomes undeniable. Because even the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile confirmed it. There were ways to increase compression when the engine is running under real conditions. That single detail explains everything we have seen. Why Mercedes was not the fastest in top speed, but still pulled away. Why they gained time at the end of straights, when others started losing energy. Why their performance looked controlled, instead of aggressive. Because this was not about having more power. It was about using energy more efficiently than anyone else. And higher compression gives you exactly that. Better combustion. More usable energy. Stronger deployment at the most critical moments. But here is where it becomes even more important. Because Ferrari did not just understand the gap. They realized what it meant. This was not a small advantage. This was a structural difference in how performance was being generated. And in a regulation era built around energy, that is everything. So they pushed. Not publicly. Not dramatically. But directly where it matters. To the FIA. Alongside other manufacturers. All pointing to the same issue. This rule was not being enforced the way it was intended. And once that becomes clear, there is only one possible outcome. The rule has to change. Because if it does not, the gap does not close. It grows. And this is where everything shifts immediately. Because the moment the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile confirmed the gap, they acted. Not later in the season. Not next year. Now. The rule was updated to ensure that compression is no longer checked only in cold conditions, but also when the engine is operating under real temperatures. Which means the gray area is gone. The loophole is gone. And the advantage that lived inside it is no longer protected. But here is where the story becomes even more intense. Because this is not just about removing performance. It is about forcing Mercedes to change how their entire system works. Because that extra efficiency was not isolated. It was connected to everything. Energy deployment, battery usage, race pace consistency, corner exit performance. All of it built around maximizing that hidden advantage. So when you remove it, you do not just lose speed. You lose balance. You lose optimization. You lose the exact timing that made the car so effective. And that is why Suzuka becomes the most important race so far. Because this is the first time Mercedes will run without that invisible layer, without that extra margin, without the one thing Ferrari just exposed. And Suzuka does not forgive. High-speed corners, long, flowing sections, constant energy demand. If there is even a small drop in efficiency, it will show everywhere, not in one corner, across the entire lap. But here is the part that changes everything. Because even now, there is still uncertainty. How much of Mercedes' dominance actually depended on that rule? Because if it was the core of their performance, then what we are about to see in Japan is a completely different fight. Ferrari closer, Red Bull back in contention, a grid that suddenly compresses. But if it was only one piece, if Mercedes still arrives and controls the race, then something much bigger is happening. Because it would mean Ferrari found the rule, they closed the gap, and it still was not enough. And that is the moment where this story stops being about regulations and starts being about dominance. Real dominance. The kind that does not disappear when the rules change. The kind that forces everyone else to rethink everything. So now, everything leads to one moment. One lap. One comparison. Because when the cars go flat out in Suzuka, when the drivers push without limitation, when the stopwatch delivers the truth, we will finally see it. Not the theory. Not the assumption. The reality. And the real question is no longer what Ferrari discovered. The real question is, did they just remove Mercedes' biggest advantage? Or did they just prove it was never enough to stop them? And this is where everything finally comes together. Because up until this moment, Ferrari exposed the rule. The FIA closed the gap. Mercedes lost the gray area. But none of that matters until the car hits the track. Because Formula One does not reward theories. It rewards execution. And Suzuka is where execution is exposed instantly. Because this circuit demands everything. Precision. Confidence. Energy management at the absolute limit. There is no hiding here. No masking weaknesses. No surviving with compromises. If something has changed, Suzuka will reveal it in the first push lap. And that is why this moment is so critical. Because for the first time in 2026, Mercedes arrives without the unknown. Without the hidden advantage that no one could fully explain. Everything is now visible. Everything is measurable. Everything is exposed. But here is where the tension reaches its peak. Because what happens next defines the entire season. If Mercedes shows even the smallest drop, a few tenths, a slight loss at the end of the straight, a weaker exit when energy matters most, then the entire grid will feel it. Ferrari will feel it first. Closer. More competitive. Finally able to attack instead of defend. Red Bull will feel it. Opportunities opening. Pressure increasing. A fight that suddenly becomes real again. And that is how dominance starts to break. Not with a collapse. With a crack. But if that crack never appears, if Mercedes goes through Suzuka exactly the same, stable, precise, always gaining where others lose, then everything changes. Because that means Ferrari did find the rule. They did close the gap. And it still was not the reason Mercedes was ahead. Which leads to the final truth. This was never about one advantage. It was about understanding. Understanding energy better. Understanding timing better. Understanding this new era before anyone else. And that is something no regulation can take away. So when the lights go out in Japan, when the cars reach full speed for the first time, when the drivers commit with nothing left to hide, we are not just watching another race. We are watching the moment where the illusion disappears, where everything becomes clear, and where one question finally gets answered. Did Ferrari just take away the key to Mercedes' dominance? Or did they just prove that Mercedes never needed it in the first place? And this is where the story reaches its final point. Because everything we have seen, everything Ferrari uncovered, everything the FIA changed, all of it leads to one unavoidable conclusion. Mercedes forced the sport to react. Not with penalties. Not with disqualifications. With a rule change. And in Formula One, that means one thing. They found something real. Something powerful enough to shift the balance of the entire grid. But here is the part that defines everything. That kind of advantage does not come from luck. It comes from understanding something before everyone else. Seeing the gap. Building around it. Optimizing every detail around that single idea. And that is exactly what Mercedes did. They did not just build a fast engine. They built a complete system. Energy generation. Energy deployment. Chassis balance. Aerodynamic efficiency. Everything working together, perfectly timed. So now that one piece of that system has been taken away, we finally get to see the truth. The real strength of the car. The real level of Mercedes. Because if they still dominate in Suzuka, if they still control races, if they still look untouchable, then the message is clear. This was never about a loophole. It was about mastery. A level that no one else has reached yet. But if they do not, if the gap disappears, if Ferrari suddenly finds itself fighting for the win, then we finally understand something else. That hidden rule Ferrari found was not just important. It was everything. And that is why this moment matters more than any race so far. Because this is not just about Japan. It is about the direction of the entire 2026 season. Because whoever truly understands this new era does not just win races. They control the championship. They control the future. So when the cars launch off the line, when they hit full speed through Suzuka, when everything is pushed to the limit, there will be no more questions left. No more theories. No more hidden advantages. Only performance. Pure. Visible. Undeniable. And in that moment, we will finally see it. Whether Ferrari just exposed the weakness that breaks Mercedes, or whether they just proved that Mercedes was always one step ahead, no matter what.